Welcome to another episode of Readers and Writers, brought to you by the Publishing Club of Laguna Woods. I am your host, Dr. Dianna Bolen. Today's guest is Dr. Dennis Glauber. He was born in South Africa. His family came from Lithuania, and they barely escaped Eastern Europe and the Holocaust. Dennis lived in South Africa during apartheid and immigrated to the United States in 1980. He is an accomplished author, retired anesthesiologist, and radio show champion. He lectured on opera at UC Irvine, as well as has written program notes and composer profiles for Seattle music venues. He has an extensive and impressive knowledge with access to many facts on a vast and diverse array of topics, which he retains and recalls with ease. No need to consult Google. Let me repeat. Dennis has a diverse amount of information in his head, and that truly amazes me. So I hope by the end of the show, you will get a better sense just how impressive and inspiring Dennis Glauber is. I cannot do justice in this short introduction. At the age of 96, Dennis continues to inspire and educate in the pages of his book, In My Anecdotage, Tales from a Very Long Life. He published this book in 2022 and shares his insights and musings in 29 essays. We will talk about a select few of those essays here today. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you for that extraordinarily flattering introduction.
Well, I think you've earned it.
Thank you.
So in your book, you wrote about age and aging.
Yes.
And quoted Jerry Binder.
Correct.
And I think that would be helpful for our audience to learn about the A-team of aging.
Well, I think many people will remember Jerry Binder, who was a considerable figure around the village as a lecturer and all the rest of it. I'd like to quote, and I stress in my piece about aging, I end my words with his words, and I'd like to stress that what I'm going to read now, which I think is beautifully written, is from Jerry, not from me. And I need the glasses.
Yeah, that's right. I'll hold you.
And Jerry wrote, he urges us to refuse to be self-absorbed in a D life, endlessly talking about disability, disease, death, depression, dementia, decay, doldrums, deterioration. In the D life, our heart song is a dirge. He calls on us to join the A-team, celebrate being active, alert, amiable, able, animated, astute, attractive, amazing, apt, awesome, artistic, adventurous, affable, ambitious, admirable, aware, accomplished, affirming, avid, authentic, and, yes, alluring, adorable, and amorous. On the A-team, our heart song is an anthem. Bravo to that, dear Jerry.
I love it. I love it. And in addition to your thoughts on aging, and Jerry's as well, you also take a vigorous position on creativity and aging in one of your essays. Could you say more about that?
Yes. I've always been struck by the remarkably long lives of famous creative people. When I think of artists like Picasso, who lived into his 90s, and Matisse, who lived into his 90s, and others, Tamayo, I think, lived to 100 and something. George O'Keeffe was 99, that kind of thing. And of course there are the outliers who die young, like Raphael and
Mozart.
And others who died young by suicide, for example, Jackson Pollock or Vincent van Gogh. I pronounce it Van Gogh, the the Dutch way that he would have pronounced it, not Van Gogh. In the field of photographers, it's even more striking. All the famous great Ansel Adams and Edward Steichen and Berenice Abbott and so on, all lived into the late 80s or late 90s. That's an observation that I've made. Musicians too. Obviously, somebody will say, wait a minute, think about Mozart, who died so young, Schubert, who died so young, Mendelssohn, who died so true, but think of the others who, Aaron Copland, who was 99, Bernstein, who was in his 90, Elliot Carter was 104.
My goodness.
And so on.
Yes.
So
and that is remarkable. I mean, you pull this information off the top of your head. I could not do that.
it comes off the top of my head because there's very little hair to obstruct it.
Oh, I see. Yeah, but that's a fact, but I don't think it has anything to do with it. So, I mean, so you're saying that perhaps being creative, being active like the A's in the first topic that we talked about, somehow prolongs life.
I think so, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've been quite creative in your own life. Yes.
Modestly.
Yeah, and here you are, 96.
96 except my left knee, which is 113.
Oh my. I know, it makes it hard to walk sometimes. Yes, yes. So another topic that was covered in your book was 9/11. This show is actually being recorded 2 days after the 22nd anniversary of September 11th. You spoke in your essay on Requiem about the experience of 9/11. You were not in the United States at the time.
That's correct.
And where were you on that day, and what was it like?
We were visiting our kids who lived at that stage in Brussels, Belgium. We had arranged well in advance that we would go and gather to a concert in the cathedral at Ghent, part of what they call the Festival of Flanders. We had tickets booked for a performance of Verdi's Requiem, the greatest masterpiece in that form, I think. And when my wife and I, our son took us to the station in Brussels, and as he left us, he said, look, you'd better take a cell phone with you. We didn't have our cell phones. Just in case we have a problem with the babysitter, because we're coming through to, we're meeting for dinner and then the concert, the performance of the Requiem. Better take a cell phone with you, but the battery's a bit flat. So don't switch it on till about 5. The only conceivable reason why we're going to have to call you would be if there's a babysitter problem. Their child was only about 1 year at the time. And so that's what we did. And at 5 o'clock we remembered, maybe David's calling. And we switched on the phone, and the first thing we heard him say was, have you heard? And this was about 5 o'clock, which would be 11 a.m. in New York. And as you remember, the first hit was at 8:46. And of course we hadn't heard. And our plan was, we said, well, we'll come home, we'll catch the train. And he said, you will not, you're strangers, you're foreigners in a strange country. And our daughter-in-law, his wife Drew, was already on the way to pick us up. But we decided, the three of us, when we did meet with her, not to be picked up, but to go through and go to the concert. Well, it wasn't a concert, Dianna. It was a memorial service. The announcement was made. Of course, at this hour of many people already had dressed in black, and An announcement was made of a few moments or minutes silence before the performance, a stress that it was not a performance, it was not a concert, it was a memorial service, and that we were to be in absolute silence and definitely no applause at the end, and silence until we evacuate the cathedral row by row, and no speaking until we're well outside the precincts. So that, to me, was, it couldn't have been a more, I will never forget where I was on 9/11. And I wonder how many of the viewers have got their own stories of why I will never forget where I was on 9/11.
Yes, and what a moving memorial, and done so spontaneously and with so much heart.
That's right.
Yes, yes, I know. It was a very sad day.
Very.
And that's covered in your book.
Yes.
And, yes, yes. So now, moving on to something lighter.
Yes, ma'am.
Your playfulness with language is apparent in your essay, Reading from Right to Left. Please tell our audience about that essay.
That's one of the pieces that I read that matured slowly, gestated slowly. Some of the stuff I write is spontaneous, but I was thinking about that for many, many times. The awareness that left is relegated to a secondary position. If you take the French word, and I thought about this when I was actually in France at the time, you take the French word gauche for left. In French, it's a perfectly innocent word. Translated into English, it's clumsy, naive. Its opposite number, droit, for right. We've stolen that into English, adroit. Well, adroit is accomplished. That's it. So right beats left all along, and that's unfair. I mean, we talk about leftovers. People who are left to eat on leftovers. I mean, the idea comes out of left field. Everything is, and this is. I'm a right-hander, so don't think I'm pleading the cause for left-handedness because I'm lefty. Not a closet lefty. I'm a right-hander, and I think I just want to show by pleading the cause that my heart is in the right place, which is on the left.
There you go. Yeah, and I loved your looking at words like disheveled.
Yes.
And that we don't have the opposite as a word in our language.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, yes.
I'd like to say I'm gruntled when I'm not disgruntled.
Yes, yes, but people don't do that. Well, and along those lines, since you are a quiz champion, can you name the 5 left-handed presidents?
There may be more than 5, but I'm thinking of fairly recent presidents. Ronald Reagan was left-handed. So was Bill Clinton. Obama. Harry Truman was left-handed. And I'm almost certain Joe Biden is left-handed, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think he might be. Yeah. Yes, I think he might be.
Yeah.
So again, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazes me anyway. So this brings us to your time as a radio quiz show champion. Now, the South American show you were featured on was,
South African.
Oh, excuse me, South African was featured. What you were featured on was 21.
That's right.
And there was a U.S. show by the same title, and that show in the U.S. was a subject of a congressional investigation. Now, it was proved that the contestants were actors and were given the answers to the questions. Were you an actor?
No. the show that I was on, and as you correctly said, it was radio. It wasn't television. This is now way back in the late 50s and through much of the 60s that I had intermittent appearances on the show. Yes, it was based on 21. In other words, the contestants had to answer questions reaching the magic. In each category of question offered, you could take from 1 to 11. If you asked for an 11, because you might want to get to 21 in 2 giant steps, a 10 and an 11, or maybe 3 sevens, or whatever it may be. That was similar to the original,
So the higher the number, the harder the question.
The harder the question. So an 11 is always a multi-choice. Like I remember I had a couple of 11s in my career, like name the 12 labors of Hercules.
Oh.
That kind of thing, or that sort of thing. And the contestant, the one contestant is in his soundproof, view-proof, air-proof booth, and I'm in my booth, and I'm cut off while he's answering a question, or she's answering a question, and then I get my chance. The same category is offered, obviously not depending on whether you've asked for the same number, you're going to get the same question.
Oh, I see.
But otherwise, be a different one. Anyway, you're going to go into all the detail. It turned out, and this was displayed in a good movie that Robert Redford produced, called Quiz Show, where Ralph Fiennes played the part of the guy who came from a distinguished academic family. His name was Charles Van Doren, and he was being fed the answers. But I had always had to assure people the South Africans weren't sophisticated enough to...
Well, sophisticated or...
the American producers just try to justify their thing by saying, look, this is entertainment. But as far as we were concerned, it was not to be entertainment. It was to be an honest...
contest.
Display of knowledge.
Yes.
Or,
Yes.
So, yes, take my word for it, I was not an actor.
And in fact, I asked you to bring your prized book.
Oh.
How would you describe this book?
Oh, this was Daddy's black book. For God's sake, the children knew not to interfere with it. Anything. I worked, when you're in that sort of game, it's like an athlete who has to keep training to prove to maintain his ability. I had to keep working and studying and so on. More than 100 different topics that I determined to make myself reasonably expert at. And this dates back more than 50 years, and I shudder to think, did I really know all that stuff in those days?
It's a lot of information. I see your categories here of silver screen, Dickens, Greek art and sculpture. I'm just naming a few. Chess, English literature, and how did you remember? So then, on these page numbers, you would then have lists of the different Molière, Racine, Flaubert. So how would you memorize this?
Repetition, concentration, and being blessed with a good memory.
Yes. Well, some people would debate whether it was a good memory or that you really put in the effort that you needed to.
A lot of hard work. A lot of hard work.
Yes.
How my kids survived always being asked, are you related? And then, of course, the Dennis Glober. My favorite story about that is, on one occasion, my son was asked that when he gave his name, and they said, are you related to Dennis Glober? And he rolled his eyes, sort of, here we go again. He said, yeah, that's my dad. And the guy said, "Really? He gave my wife an anesthetic, and boy, does he know how to charge." And that was nothing to do with the famous guy.
Yeah, that knows all this information. Okay. So as I just spoke, some people believe that they just have a bad memory. In some cases, that may be true because disease or injury or medication side effects might actually affect memory. But in a majority of cases, people can remember more things and more facts if you know what to do to help yourself remember, no matter what your age. Specifically, like you mentioned, you have to pay attention. You can't be distracted. You have to apply effort. And the older we get, I don't know about you, but the less energy I have, which means that effort is more of an effort.
Correct.
Yes. And then you have to decide on what kind of structure you're going to use. Like your book is a specific type of structure. And your structure needs to fit with the kind of structure of your memory. I like to think of memory as kind of a file cabinet. So to remember better, you need to have an organization to the information that you want to remember. They have to have relationships, as in your book, groupings, plus you have to have rehearsals. You can't just expect to read through it once, and you also have what are called location cues. So let me ask you this, Dennis. Do you ever think about the hereafter?
No.
Well, I think about the hereafter every time I go into a different room, and I say to myself, what am I hereafter? I gotcha.
You got me. Okay.
This is actually called the doorway effect.
You got me.
And the doorway effect is related to your memory and your mind's ability to do what is called location updating. So memories are stored kind of with a time and a place stamp. So it's believed, scientists believe, that when you're moving from one room to another, you are actually disrupting the memory, and that's why it's harder to remember what you came into a given room for. Now, this can even occur, and thank goodness I learned this, because it can even occur on your computer when you switch from one screen to another, and you can't remember what was on the screen before.
Yes.
Now, maybe you can. But so being more aware of transitions may help you compensate for this effect. I love going to the bathroom because it's the only room I know why I'm there for.
Yeah. I must confess, I find lapses in memory more frequent as I get older, particularly names. Names of people are harder to.
Yes.
They come a few minutes later, but
Yeah, but there's a lag.
I find that I turn to my wife and say, "What is the name of that person you know the one."
It helps to have a spouse because one of you is likely to remember. But there's also memory tools, and there are mnemonics. And for example, and you may be able to do this, can you name the 5 Great Lakes?
Yes, I just have the mnemonic of homes.
Right you are.
Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior.
Yes, exactly. And you may know from medical school, this is kind of an easy one. How does a doctor remember what COPD means?
How do you mean besides the actual meaning?
Yeah, so the mnemonic would be cigarettes often produce death.
That's very good. I hadn't heard that one. That's very good.
But I imagine there are other ones in medical school that
Yes, they're usually obscene.
Oh, are they?
The,
Then you don't want to share, or do you?
I'm not going to share the 12 cranial nerves.
Okay. But I'll look it up.
I'll tell you afterwards.
Okay. Well, and speaking of mnemonics, Akira Haraguchi, has an unofficial record of recalling 100,000 digits in 16 hours. He did take 5-minute breaks to eat or use the toilet. But the question is, how did he do that? No guesses.
I have no idea.
Well, he converted the numbers to letters. So he, again, worked with the information. He just wasn't given those digits and recalled them like that, but worked with the information to make the letters into stories and recalled the stories. And by doing that, he was able to have a meaningful, memorable amount of information that he could regurgitate in the form, or translate it back into numbers. And actually, Lewis Carroll, who from Alice in Wonderland, also used that same system to memorize things. So that's, and just for all of you who are out there, you go to the doctor, you complain about your memory, and the doctor asks you to remember 4 objects. Has it ever happened to you?
No.
Okay, well, this is for all our viewers. So let's say the objects are a ball, a string, a cat, and a tree. And you're going, oh my goodness, how am I going to remember this? Because the doctor's going to ask you that at the end of the appointment. What you do is you create an image of a tree with a cat in the tree and a ball on the string.
Yes.
And you remember the image.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's...
I like the story of the guy who goes to the doctor complaining about his memory. And he said, well, how old are you? And he said, I'm in my 90s. He said, "Well," and the doctor says, well, you must expect that. And he said, look, I don't want to be fobbed off and tell me because you're getting old and so on. The least you can do is take a decent history and say, and the doctor says, you're quite right. Okay. Well, now, tell me, how long has this been troubling you? He said, how long has what been troubling me?
Done. Yes, for sure. So anyway, a few more things to help your memory are get sleep or take breaks. You cannot cram information. Alrighty. Well, that's just memory stuff. So before we wrap up today, I'm going to fire a few quiz questions at you. Okay, how many time zones are there in Russia?
How many?
Time zones are there in Russia?
Oh, gosh. Something like 8 or 9.
Oh, 11. Sorry. How about, who was the only woman to win the $64,000 question?
I wasn't in this country at the time. But
okay.
There was somebody called Joyce Brothers.
Right you are. Yeah. Right you are. And do you remember what her topic of expertise was?
No, as I say, I wasn't here.
It was boxing.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. What state has a city named Truth or Consequences?
New Mexico.
Right you are. Good. And let's see, last question. What were the 6 queens consort of Henry VIII?
Ooh, no. His first wife was Catherine of Aragon, the Spaniard, and he divorced her to marry Anne Bolen, and he had her head chopped off in order to marry Jane Seymour. There was another there was Anne of Cleves. The last one was Catherine Parr. She's the one who survived him. So I've missed one.
Another Catherine.
Another Catherine.
I think.
Catherine of Aragon, Catherine Parr, and Catherine Howard?
Yes, yes you are. Excellent. Well, that concludes another episode of Readers and Writers. New episodes are broadcast every month at 10:30 a.m. and on Mondays and 4:30 p.m. on Thursdays. So thank you again. You've been a wonderful host, a great joy to get to know you preparing for this show. And I did not coach you on any any questions. So
good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a great time.